Going through a construction boom, sections of Leavenworth Street are too. After about a dozen years of sitting idle, in fact, an empty lot will soon be home to the Oxworth Apartments.
Our John Chapman tells us the name of the complex pays homage to the site. Ox is a bovine reference, and Worth refers to Leavenworth Street.
Construction workers are digging up some of Omaha's history on the corner of 27th and Leavenworth.
This was the site of the Alameda Dairy building for many, many decades. It was demolished in the 1980s. Back then, unfortunately, the demolition techniques meant they would just push the walls into the basement and pour dirt on top of it. So you'll see here the massive hole we've got because we have to over-excavate that entire foundation of that old Alameda Dairy that was buried in the 1980s.
The cold storage warehouse of the Alameda Dairy is still standing. It was converted into an upholstery shop over the years. The old building will be repurposed.
Community room, leasing room, workout room, sauna, yoga, really going to be a neat space.
A $43 million project will grow from this dirt lot, 194 apartments, complete with a courtyard, swimming pool, fire pits, and outdoor lounge area. All of this will be constructed in the shadow of downtown Omaha's skyline.
This neighborhood it hasn't seen as much development in the last decade when a lot of the other urban pockets have started to develop.
Omaha Mayor Gene Stouther says this project is a continuation of building up the city's urban core.
This property creates an important mix of the past and the future, development and preservation, and that's what we're doing. We're building new and we're preserving the old heritage.
In Omaha, I'm John Chapman, First Alert 6.
The Oxworth Apartments will feature studio 1 and 2 bedroom units ranging from about $1,000 to $1,900 a month. Developers hope to have the project complete by spring